Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to cover with you alternative routes to employment this afternoon. I'm Hazel Mathieson and I work for Skills Development Scotland. I'm the Head of National Operations, so I've got responsibility for the delivery of all the national training programmes that we deliver on behalf of the Scottish Government. So I'm just going to give you a flavour of what else is on offer out there for our young people in particular. And then I'll allow some time at the end for questions. For those of you that don't know much about our organisation, I'm sure a lot of you do though, but in the main we deliver the skills, national skills programmes, we deliver the careers and information advice and guidance offer to young people and adults. But fundamentally, we're also seen as a catalyst to move forward the skills agenda in Scotland. Relatively speaking, we have a fairly small budget compared to the further education, the higher education organisations, but we're seen as a catalyst to try and bring it all together and to try to focus it on the demand of the Scottish economy. So we've got a big role to play. I was just going to show you some information that you're probably well aware of, but just the change in the destinations of young people leaving school. So in the 70s you saw a fairly significant percentage moving straight into employment, and a smaller amount going into further education and training, and still a fair amount who are out of work, out of the labour force. In the 80s you'd seen a significant shift, or a slight shift I suppose downwards, but more youngsters moving into further and higher education and less straight into employment. But what you now see is the significant number of youngsters moving into further and higher education and less into employment. And the latest figures we have are around about 6% of our young people move into modern apprenticeship opportunities. And likewise, just other information that again you'll probably be aware of, just the work readiness that employers tell us about the young people who leave school, who leave college and who leave higher education, and how well prepared they are. But I'm sure you're up to speed with all that. So what I want to talk about particularly is modern apprenticeships. We deliver modern apprenticeships on behalf of the Scottish Government. It's a huge investment. We spend just over £70 million a year on modern apprenticeships, and I just checked the figures before I left the office. We have just over 35,000 modern apprentices in training at the moment. It's seen by the Government as a key economic support to the economy, and it's seen as a significant way to get particularly young people into employment. And I think because we've seen such significant rises in the numbers of youngsters and adults moving into apprenticeships, I think it's a reference to how the Government see modern apprenticeships as part of coming out of recession. We just deliver on behalf of the Government. We contract with about 350 organisations to deliver on our behalf. Voluntary sector, private sector, colleges, local authorities. There's a whole gambit under there. We use Public Contracts Scotland to contract for our provision every year, but we determine what it is that will be delivered. So we do a procurement exercise, we set a demand statement based on what we think the needs of the Scottish economy are, and then we contract on a yearly basis for that provision. What we find is most years the Government changed the policy, so the policy drivers for who the programme is aimed at can change. 16 to 19s are always the top priority, and they get the top funding contributions. This current year, so 10-11, we've had some slight changes to policy, but what I've put down here is the changes to the 12-13. So there are two distinct groups. We support every 16 to 24-year-old across every sector. So that's the difference to the current policy. So from next Monday the policy is changing. So every 16 to 19-year-old, every 16 to 24-year-old, recognising the unemployment situation for young people up to the age of 24, there's been a change in policy to ensure that all young people up to the age of 24 are eligible for modern apprentice support. Now, the contribution we give to training providers or employers to support the training delivery is slightly less when they're over 19, recognising that quite often if you're over 19 you will have had some work experience and you'll bring some skills with you to the job, or you'll already have some skills in the job, whereas the younger cohort, the 16 to 19 cohort, have less skills, so we have a higher contribution level. For the individuals aged 25 plus, we only support certain sectors. We support the sectors that the Scottish Government deem as the key sectors in the economy. So we support life sciences, we support oil and gas, we support construction, we support food and drink, we support hospitality, financial services. So we don't support every adult through a modern apprenticeship. Should they want to do it themselves, or should their employer want to do it, that's great, but there isn't public funding available. So MAs aim to equip people with intermediate skills. So when you get an MA, you get the SVQ either up to level 2 up to level 5. The predominance is level 3. You get the core skills either embedded or separately certificated, and employers may add on their own industry-specific qualifications that they deem as appropriate for the job. So these qualifications are designed by industry for industry. They're not our qualifications, they're not SQA's qualifications, but the Sector Skills Councils bring them forward to the Modern Apprenticeship Group in Scotland, who approve them if they think they're fit for delivery and they think they represent a job in Scotland. Just to give you an indication of who the employers are and who the individuals are, 95% of the employers that we have engaged with us are SMEs. So it's predominantly small employers who are recruiting modern apprentices. The figure that I've got there, 10,559 employers, that's a figure that's probably a couple of months out of date. We're probably sitting at about 11,500 employers now engaged with us. So it's still quite a small number when you think of the number of employers in Scotland. On the individual side, again, the bulk of individuals are working in SMEs. So nearly 90% of modern apprentices work within an SME. They don't work within a large organisation, because I think sometimes organisations think that, and individuals think that it's only large employers that employ apprentices. Well, it's not. It's actually the opposite. And predominantly we are supporting the youngest cohort. So in last operational year, 60% were 16 to 19-year-olds. This year, we've seen an increase in the target we've got to achieve, and the percentage is likely to be around 50%, but still it's predominantly focused on young people. So it's work-based training. Some individuals who are apprentices are trained on the job in the workplace. Some have day release, some have block release, but primarily it's a work-based qualification. I think in the current climate, it's very, very important, because what we're actually doing is squeezing every ask out of employers. So we are working very closely with employers to say, have you got an opportunity, and can we support somebody, an extra member of staff in your workforce, to become a modern apprentice? So it's shifting a lot of responsibility to employer and trying to engage them to help us out of recession and to try and increase the people in employment. So I think that's a really important point. It's demand-led because the qualification is what the employer wants. I suppose for the individual, it's earning while they're learning. So that's how I know, particularly when you see the cost. I know we haven't got fees for higher education up here, but there is down south. But even the cost of accommodation and all the rest of it, they are earning while they're learning here. So there is a compelling argument, and something that parents might be interested in. And progressively we're seeing a blurring of the academic and vocational routes, and I'll say a wee bit more about that in a minute. So for an individual, what are the benefits? Well, they're earning. The minimum rate for a modern apprentice is £2.60 an hour, but more often than not what they will get is the rate for the job. So the employer rate for the job, the young person will be paid. A lot of people say to us, what happens when the person finishes their modern apprenticeship? Well, it's just like in the economy at the moment. A lot of people are on fixed-term contracts, a lot of people are on permanent contracts, but they generally are not treated any differently to mainstream employees in an organisation. They are employees. Real work experience It's very recognised, particularly by the engineering and the construction sectors. It's seen as real training that meets the needs of their workforce. There are possibilities for long-term progression, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. And as I said earlier, we're covered by legislation for wages. So how does it fit into the education system? Right, this is where there's more work to be done. As I said, the basis of the qualification is an SVQ, and they're now all credit rated. So any new qualifications that are coming forward, or any new modern apprentice frameworks that are coming forward, are accredited by SCQF. So that, something coming out now, this has only been for the past couple of years, but there is a credit rating in there. And what you now find is that a lot of the engineering and construction, but particularly engineering companies, use it as a route to develop their workforce. So they'll progress, to an HND and into degree levels. So I think you'll find in certain sectors there's recognition of the learning, and it can take them into second and third year of a higher education course as well. We need to do more of that. And the post-16 reform legislation that came out in September indicated that that's the way that the government wants us to go. They want more universities and colleges to work together to try and see greater progression routes, particularly for apprenticeships, so that youngsters see it as a real career progression. I've got a friend whose son has just completed an apprenticeship with BP, and he finished in the summer there, and he's now earning 35,000. It's not to be sniffed at. So these are the things that our youngsters need to understand and need to know. And a lot of the criticism, I suppose, that we hear back from employers is they're not getting sufficiently qualified youngsters applying for the apprenticeship opportunities, because they're looking for youngsters who've got good qualifications out of school. So there is work still to be done on parity of STEAM, but we're getting there, and I think there's a real push by the Scottish Government, because they want to see their investment maximised, and they want to see, you don't want people to have to repeat years and to repeat parts of qualifications, so MEs are part of this bundle as well. And just to give you an indication of the numbers, now this is what we contracted for this year. This is the volume. Now when I say this year, I mean this time last year. So the highest areas, now we work out the contracts on the basis of demand that we expect from employers. So business admin, construction, hospitality, management and retail were the greatest areas. So these were where the greatest job opportunities. Now that's not broken down into 16 to 19 and 20 plus. That's for all. So that's what we contracted for. However, I've just looked at the data, and the greatest areas we've actually delivered also include care and not admin. And that reflects the fact that a lot of local authorities and other public sector organisations haven't recruited as many admin modern apprentices this year as we had expected them to do. So there's actually been a switch, and we've seen more youngsters and more adults move into care modern apprentices than we had anticipated at the beginning of the year. But we have a flexible system to enable contracts to move around. But still, for young people, engineering is a very high volume. So, I mean, I've given you the figures there for all age groups, but for young people, the engineering sector is a very popular and quite a large sector. And just to give you an indication of how modern apprenticeships have grown and moved on, 4 years ago we were delivering about 10,500 modern apprentices for our young people and adults, and this year we're on target. In fact, it was in the press a couple of days ago, we've achieved the 25,000 target. The Scottish Government, the SNP administration, when they came in, pledged that they would support 25,000 modern apprentices this year and for the next 4 years. So we've achieved the first 25,000, we've only got another 100,000 to go, which means for us a significant ramp up in our employer engagement to ensure that we've got employers who are sufficiently signed up to take on the additional 100,000 modern apprentices. But sometimes when you see large volumes, what you see is a drop-off in achievement rates, and we've not seen that. The achievement rates have continued to go up, and at the moment we're sitting at approximately 75%. So 75% of all youngsters and adults who start achieve their modern apprentice. Just a slightly wider agenda now, we also deliver on behalf of the government both the Get Ready for Work and the Training for Work programmes. Get Ready for Work is the intervention for youngsters who, I suppose, have had some barriers. They've left school, but they've not been able to make that next step into further education, job, modern apprenticeship. So our provision is in place to help them make that next step. So it's whatever barrier, whether it be a social emotional, whether it be a disability, whether it's a core skill issue, or whether it's just they don't really know, they've kind of lost their way. Get Ready for Work is in place for them if that's what they want to do. We deliver about 9,500 places every year. There's lots of other interventions out there as well. We've got activity agreements now. There's a lot of ESF projects at a local level. A lot of local authorities and a lot of colleges run provision, but Get Ready for Work is a national programme, so it's available in all areas, and we'll try and complement what's available in all local areas. Training for Work is our adult intervention, and it's short, sharp provision. It used to be, several years ago it was quite a significant programme, but now what you see is DWP offering a lot of interventions for adults. So Training for Work is for adults aged 18 plus. It's short, sharp provision for adults who have come out of employment and who require to be upskilled to move them back into employment. It can be 1 or 2 weeks of a short, sharp IT course or driving course, or it can be a wee bit longer if it's maybe hospitality or whatever it may be. Essentially, the course meets the needs of the business. The business says, I will recruit some people if they've got X, Y and Z skills. We will try and ensure that in that locality we put Training for Work provision on so that individuals can progress through the training and into work. Again, it's not the only offer that's on the table. We've got significant DWP interventions now. We've got the work programme that's across the country, and the work-based academies that are now getting rolled out. So there's lots of other interventions, but Training for Work is available across the country to complement what else is on the ground. Just to give you an indication of what other provision we have and the investment by the government. So 133 million the government is currently spending on skills interventions that are delivered by Skills Development Scotland across the country. So the first three, Modern Apprentices, Get Ready for Work and Training for Work, I've spoken about. The employer recruitment incentive, just to give you an indication of how it works, this is in place at the moment. This is a recruitment grant for employers recruiting specific categories of young people and adults. It will be continuing as of Monday, but we still haven't firmed up the policy lines with the government, so we're waiting for the policy lines so that we can launch the new employer recruitment incentive. A lot of this stuff, you can imagine, is down to the nuts and bolts of getting budgets through for the government, so quite often it's very last minute that we hear what the offers are, and we need to quickly operationalise them to get them out into the marketplace. So there will be a recruitment incentive next year, we just don't know what it is. I suspect it will be around helping the harder to help clients, so care leavers, young carers, ex-offenders, help them move into work, but we haven't had the final details. We're running a programme at the moment, Targeted Pathways, which is really a programme for youngsters who, in normal circumstances, if there had been sufficient work, would have been moving straight from school into work. There aren't the work opportunities, so this is a kind of intermediate labour market programme, I suppose. We don't yet know if we'll be running next year. It's running at the moment. Don't know if we'll be we'll get budget to run it next year. We'll just have to wait to see, what budget we get from the government and what the indications from the policy lines are. Flexible training opportunities, again, all indications are we'll be running it next year. It's a training grant for very small businesses, for businesses up to 150 staff. They get 50% match funding from us for training for their own staff. And finally, Adopt an Apprentice has been in place for a couple of years, and it's an employer grant as well to encourage employers to recruit redundant apprentices. So if somebody is partway through their programme, is made redundant by their employer, a new employer can get a grant incentive of £2,000 to take on this youngster to help them complete their modern apprentice and hopefully help them stay in employment. So I'll just leave that for you to read, what we're leaving our young people with, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have on the skills interventions and modern apprenticeship programmes that Skills Development Scotland deliver. No? Well, thanks very much. Oh, sorry.
What you just mentioned about the adopting apprentice,
how recently would they have had to have fallen out of work for a new employer to take them on afterwards?
Well, it's been running for a couple of years, so it's available for people from that period of time. So, I mean, generally, we hear about redundant apprentices quite quickly. The training providers will alert us if somebody's been made redundant, and then we'd contact them right away to try and re-engage them and then get them back out into employment again. Have you got somebody that you've...
probably have people in mind that might have dropped out of work like a year ago.
Are they apprentices?
They have been.
They have been. Well, get them to go back into their career centre again, and we'll get them re-engaged. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening.